The rain pounded mercilessly against the windows as I sprinted back to my office building, my heels splashing through puddles. 3 hours ago, I'd handed my office keys to a young intern struggling with a fussy baby in the downpour. 3 hours ago, I'd felt like a hero, extending kindness when she needed it most. Now, standing frozen in my office doorway, I understood how thoroughly I'd been played. My private files lay scattered across my desk. My laptop screen glowed with an email sent to our entire executive board from the intern's account, with the subject line, Senior Vice President caught embezzling funds. Attached were altered versions of my confidential reports, twisted to make it appear I'd been siphoning company money for years. The very reports I'd spent months meticulously creating to prove our CEO, Grant, was the actual criminal. My phone vibrated violently in my pocket. 17 missed calls, 29 text messages, all variations of, "What have you done?" and "Security is looking for you." The intern, Thalia, was nowhere to be seen. Neither was her baby. Just the lingering scent of baby powder mixed with expensive perfume I recognized but couldn't place. I stumbled to my desk, legs trembling as I scrolled through the fabricated evidence. They'd used my own documentation against me, altering just enough details to transform me from whistleblower to criminal. Years of financial expertise turned against me with surgical precision. The office phone rang, making me jump. I answered automatically. Margot. Grant's voice slithered through the line, honeyed with false concern. Security is on their way up. I'd suggest not making a scene. This is insane, I whispered, throat constricting. You know I didn't do this. What I know, he said, dropping all pretense, is that you should have minded your own business. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you digging? You're good, Margot, but not that good. That intern is exactly where she belongs. Unlike you. His chuckle felt like nails on my skin. By the way, she mentioned how eagerly you gave her access to everything. So trusting. The line went dead as the elevator down the hall dinged. Heavy footsteps approached. I grabbed my personal phone and purse, leaving everything else behind. The back stairwell would lead to the parking garage. I'd figure out my next move from there. As I pushed through the door, I caught sight of Thalia stepping out of Grant's private elevator across the lobby. She no longer looked harried or desperate. Her posture was confident, regal even, no baby carrier in sight. She turned slightly, her face catching the light. Recognition slammed into me like a physical blow. The woman wasn't some random intern. I'd seen her face once before, in the background of a photo on Grant's desk. His wife's younger sister. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity as security rounded the corner. I slipped into the stairwell, my world crumbling with each step down. I had just been systematically destroyed by a woman who never needed my help at all. Before I continue this story, I want to thank you for listening. If you're feeling the rage and betrayal building inside you like I did that day, please hit that like button. Drop a comment with what you think is coming next. Believe me, you won't see it coming. And subscribe to make sure you don't miss how this ends. Trust me when I say revenge is a dish best served with unexpected ingredients. My name is Margot Winters, and until that rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was Senior Vice President of Finance at Skyward Investments. I'd spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, breaking glass ceilings along the way. I was known for my unflinching integrity and analytical mind. The financial world respects numbers because they don't lie, and I respected them too. I grew up in a small town where my mother cleaned hotel rooms and my father drove trucks. They taught me that hard work and honesty would take me places. And they did. Scholarship to university. Internships that became job offers. Promotions earned through sleepless nights and brilliant financial strategies. When I joined Skyward, I was the only woman in senior leadership. The men in their identical suits with their identical haircuts watched me like hawks, waiting for me to fail. I never gave them the satisfaction. Then Grant Ackerman became CEO, charismatic, brilliant, ambitious. He valued my insight when others dismissed it. For the first time, I felt truly respected. When he asked me to dinner to discuss a project, I told myself it was purely professional. 5 dinners later, we crossed a line I'd promised myself I never would. Our affair lasted 7 months before I discovered the wedding photo tucked in his desk drawer during a late-night work session. He'd never worn a ring, never mentioned a wife. The betrayal burned through me, but I kept it professional when I ended things. The company needed my expertise, and I refused to let a personal mistake derail my career. Grant accepted my decision with surprising grace. We developed a new normal. Colleagues, nothing more. I buried myself in work, determined to prove my value extended far beyond whatever had passed between us. That's when I noticed the discrepancies. Small at first. Reporting irregularities. Investments that appeared profitable on paper but showed concerning patterns when analyzed deeply. As SVP of Finance, it was my job to investigate. What I found sent ice through my veins. Grant was systematically inflating company performance while quietly selling his own shares. Classic securities fraud, but executed with exceptional skill. If it continued, thousands of investors would lose everything while he walked away wealthy. I compiled evidence meticulously, planning to present it to the board once it was irrefutable. I told no one. Trust had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Then came the rainy day when Thalia appeared in our lobby, struggling with a baby and stack of files, spinning a heartbreaking tale about a canceled daycare and a critical deadline. The perfect damsel in distress, targeting the one executive who'd been a struggling single mother herself early in her career. My own daughter Zoe was in college now, but I remembered those days vividly. The impossible juggling act, the judgment from colleagues, the fear of asking for help. So I gave Thalia my keys, my trust, and access to everything she needed to destroy me. By midnight, my company keycard no longer worked. My email was deactivated. The security team had escorted me out like a criminal while staff watched wide-eyed. Grant stood in his office doorway, his expression a masterclass in disappointed concern. I drove home in a daze, windshield wipers beating a rhythm that matched my racing heart. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed in your lane." I pulled over, hands shaking too badly to drive. Rain hammered against my car as I finally allowed myself to break down. 15 years of building my reputation, gone in 3 hours. When the tears subsided, something else took their place. A cold, clear resolve. They had underestimated me in the most profound way possible. They thought I would slink away, reputation shattered, unable to fight back. They didn't realize they'd just declared war on a woman with nothing left to lose. The next morning brought reporters to my doorstep. The story had broken overnight. Trusted executive caught embezzling funds. Heroic intern discovers evidence. CEO expresses profound disappointment in trusted colleague. I closed my blinds and declined to comment. Instead, I called my attorney, Olivia, who listened silently to my story. "They've constructed this perfectly," she finally said. "Your electronic signature is on documents you claim are forged. The evidence was found on your computer, in your office, which you willingly gave someone else access to, and your history with Grant, which no one knew about," I interrupted. "Except now everyone does. Thalia apparently mentioned to HR that you'd hinted at a past relationship during your conversation, combined with the embezzlement allegations. I look like a scorned lover taking revenge and money." I finished, bile rising in my throat. "Exactly, it's your word against theirs, and they control all the evidence." I hung up feeling hollow. They had choreographed my downfall with chilling precision. That night, I received an email from my bank. Account frozen pending investigation. My credit cards followed. By morning, I couldn't even buy coffee. 3 days later, I was served with papers. Skyward was suing me for damages. The same day, my landlord called. Reporters had been bothering other tenants. Perhaps it would be best if I found other accommodations when my lease ended next month. I sat on my kitchen floor, back against the refrigerator, and laughed until tears streamed down my face. They weren't just content to fire me, they wanted to erase me. My daughter Zoe called from university, voice tight with concern. "Mom, there are articles about you online. People are asking me questions. Don't engage," I told her, keeping my voice steady despite the knife twisting in my chest. "This is a misunderstanding that will be cleared up. Is it true? What they're saying?" The question hung between us. My own daughter, doubting me. "No, I said firmly. I've never stolen a penny in my life. You know who raised you. Her hesitation before responding told me everything. The damage was spreading like poison. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I spread financial reports across my living room floor, searching for something, anything, I might have missed. Some piece of evidence they couldn't have altered or hidden. Dawn was breaking when my phone pinged with a news alert. Skyward Investments promotes whistleblower intern to junior executive. The article included a photo of Thalia beside Grant at a press conference, both smiling brilliantly. Her baby was nowhere in sight. The caption identified her as Thalia Reed, recent finance graduate and sister-in-law to CEO Grant Ackerman. Sister-in-law, the final piece clicked into place. I stared at their smiling faces until my vision blurred. This wasn't just about silencing a whistleblower. This was personal. A carefully orchestrated takedown by a man who couldn't risk exposure and a woman willing to play any role to climb the corporate ladder. As the sun rose fully, casting long shadows across my scattered papers, I made myself a promise. They thought they'd written the end of my story. They were about to discover it was merely the beginning. 6 weeks after being fired, I found myself in a cramped studio apartment on the edge of town. My elegant condo had been traded for a place where the shower leaked and neighbors argued through paper-thin walls. The security deposit had consumed the last of my accessible savings. I sat cross-legged on a secondhand mattress, laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling through job rejections. 23 so far. It turned out having suspected embezzler attached to your name made you unemployable in finance, even when the charges were never filed. Grant had been too clever for that. Criminal charges would require evidence that could be challenged in court. Character assassination required only whispers. My phone rang, displaying Zoe's number. My daughter had called daily at first, then weekly. Her voice had grown increasingly distant with each conversation. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to sound upbeat. "Mom." Her voice was tight. "I need to talk to you about tuition." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" The university called. "This semester's payment is overdue." I closed my eyes. The tuition money had been in one of my frozen accounts. "I'll figure it out," I promised. "Don't worry. That's what you said last time." Her frustration bled through. "My roommate saw an article about you online. People are asking questions." "Zoe, did you do it, Mom? Just tell me the truth." The question sliced through me. "No," I whispered. "I've told you that." Silence stretched between us. "I have to go," she finally said. "I have class." After we hung up, I hurled my phone across the room. It bounced off the wall, leaving a small dent in the plaster. One more thing I couldn't afford to fix. That night, I lay awake staring at water stains on the ceiling. I'd hit bottom. No job, dwindling resources, my own daughter doubting me. Grant and Thalia had won. The realization settled over me like a shroud. Then, something strange happened. As I acknowledged complete defeat, a peculiar calm washed over me. When you've lost everything, you also lose the fear of losing. I rose before dawn, made instant coffee, and began to plan. First, I needed income. With financial firms closed to me, I had to think laterally. I created a simple resume under my maiden name, Margot Levine, removing all references to Skyward. By noon, I'd applied to 10 small businesses needing bookkeepers. 3 days later, I was hired at a family-owned restaurant. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but it was cash in hand. I worked nights, leaving my days free for more important pursuits. Because while I was serving plates of pasta and balancing the restaurant's books, I was also hunting, not just for evidence to clear my name, but for justice. I started with public records, scouring financial disclosures Skyward had filed. I created a timeline of Grant's activities, cross-referencing them with stock prices and his known trades. Patterns emerged, but nothing concrete enough to prove fraud. I needed an insider. After 2 weeks of deliberation, I called Naomi, my former assistant. We met at a coffee shop 20 miles from the city, where no one would recognize either of us. "You shouldn't be here," were her first words as she slid into the booth opposite me. "Yet here you are," I replied. She looked thinner, her eyes darting nervously around the cafe. "They watch everything. After you left, they installed new security software. Every email, every search. Tell me about Thalia. Naomi's mouth tightened. Youngest executive in company history. Has her own team now? Moved into your old office. And Grant? They're inseparable. Always in closed-door meetings. The rumor mill is active. I nodded. Not surprising. His wife? Clueless, apparently. Or in denial. Naomi hesitated. There's something else. The quarterly reports? The numbers don't make sense. But nobody questions them. Because nobody wants to end up like me. Exactly. She glanced at her watch. I need to go. As she stood, I touched her wrist. Why did you come today, Naomi? Her eyes met mine. Because I checked the numbers myself. You weren't lying. She slid a flash drive across the table. I could lose everything for this. I already have, I reminded her. The drive contained internal projections, board presentations, and emails. Valuable, but still circumstantial. Grant had covered his tracks meticulously. Any accusation from me would look like the desperate flailing of a disgraced executive. I needed leverage, something so undeniable it couldn't be dismissed. Days blurred into weeks. I worked at the restaurant, lived frugally, and built my case methodically. I created a secure email account and began reaching out to financial journalists, testing the waters with hypothetical scenarios mirroring Skyward's activities. Most ignored me. One suggested I seek psychiatric help. 3 months after my firing, Skyward announced record profits and a major expansion. The stock soared. Grant appeared on financial news programs, charming and confident. Thalia stood in the background of these interviews, her calculated gaze never far from him. That night, I saw them together in person for the first time since my downfall. The restaurant where I worked was catering a charity event. I was helping in the kitchen when Grant and Thalia swept in with a group of executives. They claimed a table in the corner, champagne flowing freely as they celebrated their success. I watched through the kitchen door as Grant rested his hand on Thalia's lower back, leaning in to whisper something that made her laugh. His wedding ring caught the light. My hands shook so badly I dropped a tray of appetizers. The crash drew attention from nearby tables. Grant glanced over, his eyes passing over me without recognition. I'd dyed my blonde hair dark brown and lost enough weight that my cheekbones stood sharp against my skin. To him, I was just another invisible service worker. You okay? Asked the head chef. I nodded, kneeling to clean the mess, keeping my head down as bitter rage coursed through me. After they left, I found a napkin at their table with Thalia's lipstick print and a note scrawled in Grant's handwriting. Penthouse, 11 p.m. Wife's in Boston until Wednesday. I pocketed it, another small piece of evidence for a case that seemed increasingly impossible to prove. That weekend, scanning financial blogs, I found a thread discussing unusual trading patterns around Skyward's recent announcements. A user named FinWatcher had mapped stock movements suggesting insider trading. Their analysis was sophisticated, pointing to exactly what I'd suspected. I created an account and messaged them privately. After weeks of careful exchanges, I learned FinWatcher was Xavier, a quantitative analyst at an investment firm. He'd been tracking Skyward out of professional curiosity. These patterns aren't accidental, he wrote, but without internal documentation, it's impossible to prove. What if I could get that documentation? I asked. Then you'd have something worth taking to regulators. But corporate servers are fortresses. What about personal devices? Easier, potentially. If someone was stupid enough to conduct business on personal accounts. I thought about the napkin, about Penthouse, 11 p.m., about arrogance and secret rendezvous. How would one access those personal accounts? I asked. Xavier's response included technical details about keyloggers and remote access tools. Illegal methods, he emphasized, that he was describing purely academically. I thanked him and deleted our conversation. The next day, I quit my job at the restaurant, withdrew my meager savings, and began surveillance on the luxury building where Grant kept his penthouse. The doorman changed shifts at 4 p.m. and 12 a.m. The night security guard took smoke breaks at regular intervals. Cleaning staff came Mondays and Thursdays. I cataloged these patterns while formulating a plan that terrified and exhilarated me. If caught, I'd face not just humiliation but criminal charges. If successful, I might find the evidence I needed. My opportunity came 3 weeks later. Through careful observation and strategic conversations with building staff, I learned Grant would be hosting a private party at his penthouse. Caterers would be coming and going throughout the evening. I spent my last $100 on a catering company uniform and fake ID badge. Heart pounding, palms sweating, I walked into the building carrying a tray of desserts, nodding confidently to the doorman. "Penthouse," I said. "Mr. Ackerman's party." He waved me toward the service elevator. Grant's penthouse occupied the top floor, all glass and gleaming surfaces showcasing panoramic city views. Staff bustled about, setting up for what appeared to be an intimate gathering. 8 place settings on a dining table. Flowers, candles, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. I moved efficiently, placing my desserts in the kitchen where 3 caterers worked. No one questioned my presence. In service uniforms, we were functionally invisible. "Where's the restroom?" I asked a harried chef. "Through the hall, left at the artwork." I walked confidently, tray in hand, but turned right instead of left. Grant's home office door was ajar. Inside, a sleek desk held a closed laptop. Bookshelves lined one wall, a bar cart another. Photos showed Grant with his wife at various functions. None showed Thalia. I slipped inside, set down my tray, and extracted a tiny device from my pocket. My hands trembled as I plugged it into his laptop's USB port. 15 seconds to install, Xavier had said. I counted each heartbeat as the device did its work. "Looking for something?" I froze. Thalia stood in the doorway, wearing an elegant black dress, her expression unreadable. "Just delivering desserts," I said, gesturing to my tray. Got turned around. She studied me, head tilting slightly. For a horrifying moment, I thought recognition flickered in her eyes. "The kitchen is the other direction." Her voice remained neutral, but her gaze dropped to the laptop. I moved the tray, angling my body to block her view of the USB port. "Sorry, first time in this building. These penthouses all look the same to me." A smile played at her lips. "Do they? How many have you been in?" Before I could answer, voices approached. Grant's distinctive laugh echoed down the hallway. In the momentary distraction, I palmed the device, unplugging it smoothly as I shifted the tray. "I should get back," I said, moving toward the door. Thalia stepped aside, but as I passed, she whispered, "Nice hair color, Margot." Ice flooded my veins. She knew. But instead of raising an alarm, she let me walk past. The question was, why? I maintained my pace down the hallway, passing Grant and 2 men in expensive suits without making eye contact. In the kitchen, I told the head caterer I was feeling ill and needed to leave. 10 minutes later, I was blocks away, heart still pounding. The USB device clutched in my sweating palm. Had the program installed completely? And why had Thalia let me go? It took 3 anxious days before I had answers. The keylogger was functioning, sending Grant's keystrokes to a secure server. I watched as he logged into email accounts, financial platforms, messaging apps. Passwords and private conversations flowed to me like toxic gifts. What I discovered exceeded my worst suspicions. Grant wasn't just manipulating Skyward's stock for personal gain. He and Thalia were systematically looting the company through a complex scheme involving falsified contracts and offshore accounts. Millions had already been diverted. Even more disturbing were their private messages. Their relationship went beyond professional and into territory that would destroy both their careers and Grant's marriage if exposed. But most chilling were their occasional references to me. "Still worried about the M problem?" Thalia had written. "She's finished," Grant replied. "Working at some restaurant last I heard. Nobody believes a word she says. She's smarter than you give her credit for. Smart doesn't matter when nobody's listening." He was right. Even with this evidence, who would believe me? I was the disgraced executive with a vendetta. Any accusation would look like desperate revenge. I needed a plan that didn't rely on my credibility, one that would force the truth into the open through channels Grant couldn't control. That night, as I reviewed their messages, I noticed something odd. Every Tuesday, Grant forwarded specific financial documents to Thalia's personal email rather than her company account. Why the secrecy when they worked together openly? I followed the digital trail, which led to a startling discovery. Thalia wasn't just Grant's accomplice. She was his insurance policy. The documents she safeguarded would implicate him if anything went wrong, or if he ever tried to betray her. She was protecting herself, exactly as I would have done. A plan began forming, dangerous, potentially catastrophic, but with a slim chance of success. It would require perfect timing, technical precision, and the willingness to risk everything on one final gamble. As I mapped out each step, my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Ms. Winters? A formal male voice. This is Detective James Carson, Financial Crimes Division. We'd like you to come in for questioning regarding some new information about Skyward Investments. My blood ran cold. Had I been discovered? Was this the end before I'd even begun? What sort of information? I managed to ask. I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the downtown precinct. The line went dead. I sat motionless, possibilities racing through my mind. A trap? Legitimate investigation? Either way, I had hours, not days, to decide my next move. The digital evidence I'd gathered lay spread before me, proof of crimes far greater than what I'd initially uncovered. If I brought it to the police now, would they believe me? Or would Grant's influence bury the truth once more? Dawn found me still awake, my decision made. I would attend the meeting, but not empty-handed. I carefully selected and printed key documents, organizing them chronologically, evidence that told a story even skeptics couldn't ignore. As I sealed everything in an envelope, my phone chimed with an incoming email. The sender, Thalia Reed. The subject line made my heart stop. I know what you did. Let's talk. The message contained just an address and a time. That evening, 7 p.m. I stared at the screen, adrenaline coursing through me. Thalia knew about the keylogger, had probably known the moment I left the penthouse, yet she'd said nothing to Grant. His messages showed no awareness of being monitored, which meant Thalia had her own agenda, separate from his. I had 12 hours until the police meeting, 10 until Thalia's invitation. Somewhere in those intersecting timelines lay either my redemption or my final downfall. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person who might still be willing to help me, the one person who'd seen the real numbers and knew I was telling the truth. Naomi, I said when she answered. I need one more favor. Naomi agreed to meet me at a 24-hour diner halfway between the city and my apartment. When I arrived, she was already there, fidgeting with a paper napkin, tearing it into tiny strips. This is insane, she said as I slid into the booth. If anyone finds out I'm helping you, no one will, I assured her, though I couldn't guarantee anything anymore. I just need information. What's happening at Skyward? Any whispers about an investigation? She shook her head. Nothing official, but there's been tension. Grant and Thalia had a closed-door argument yesterday, voices raised enough that people noticed. About what? No one knows. But afterward, Grant canceled his meetings and left early. Thalia stayed late, going through files in her office. Your old office. My mind raced, connecting dots. Has she been acting differently lately? More cautious? More independent? Naomi considered this. Actually, yes. She's been making decisions without consulting Grant first. Small things, but noticeable. Last week, she vetoed one of his proposals in front of the executive team. Everyone was shocked. Interesting. The power dynamic was shifting. And the detective who contacted me? Carson from Financial Crimes? Never heard of him. She hesitated. But Margot, there's something else. The board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow afternoon. Closed door, executives only. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Any idea what it's about? No, but... She lowered her voice. Thalia's been meeting privately with board members. One by one, very discreetly. The pieces were starting to form a picture I hadn't anticipated. Thalia wasn't just Grant's accomplice. She was positioning herself for something more. One last question, I said. If someone wanted to access the main conference room's projection system remotely, how would they do it? Naomi stared at me. You're not planning something stupid, are you? I just smiled. After extracting the technical details I needed, I returned to my apartment to prepare for the morning's police interview. I selected evidence carefully, enough to be compelling without revealing how I'd obtained it. Then I tried to sleep. managing only fitful dozes between anxious planning. At 8:30 a.m., I arrived at the downtown police precinct, dressed in the most professional outfit I could still afford, a simple black dress and blazer that hung loose on my thinner frame. I gave the detective's name at reception and was directed to a small interview room. 10 minutes later, the door opened. The man who entered wasn't wearing a police uniform, but a crisp suit with an ID badge clipped to the pocket. "Ms. Winters, I'm Detective Carson. Thank you for coming in." "You didn't give me much choice," I replied, studying him. His demeanor was professional but not hostile. "We received some interesting documentation regarding financial irregularities at Skyward Investments." He opened a folder, revealing printouts similar to what I'd gathered. "These came from an anonymous source, but they reference matters you apparently raised concerns about before your departure." My pulse quickened. Someone else had sent evidence? "May I?" I gestured to the papers. He pushed them toward me. The documents outlined precisely the fraud I'd discovered, but with additional details I hadn't known. Offshore account numbers, transaction dates, even minutes from private meetings I hadn't been privy to. "Do you recognize this information?" Carson asked. "Some of it." I kept my voice neutral. "I identified similar patterns before I was fired, but not at this level of detail. The allegations against you, embezzlement, wasn't it? Those charges were never filed." "Because they were fabricated," I said. "I was framed to discredit my discoveries about the actual fraud happening at Skyward." Carson's expression revealed nothing. "That's a serious accusation." "Yes, it is. One I can substantiate." I slid my own folder across the table. "These documents show the actual financial manipulations taking place, primarily orchestrated by CEO Grant Ackerman and Executive Thalia Reed." He raised an eyebrow. "The whistleblower who exposed your alleged crimes, the accomplice who helped frame me," I corrected. For the next hour, I walked him through the evidence, explaining the complex financial scheme, while carefully avoiding any mention of how I'd obtained my information. Carson took notes but remained frustratingly unreadable. "This is compelling," he finally said, closing his notebook. "But there are gaps. How did you access these records after being terminated?" The question I'd been dreading. I had copies of some documents from my investigation before I was fired. Others came from concerned parties still at the company. "Naomi Chen?" he asked. My blood froze. "I don't know what you mean." Carson sighed. "Ms. Winters, we've been investigating Skyward for months. We know Ms. Chen provided you with information. She's not in trouble. In fact, she's been cooperating with us." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "Naomi is working with you?" "Not initially, but after she was approached by another party at Skyward, she came to us." "Another party?" My mind was spinning. "Who?" Carson checked his watch. "I think that question will be answered at your 7 p.m. meeting tonight." I stared at him. "You know about that?" "Like I said, we've been investigating for months, more thoroughly than you realize." He gathered his papers. "You're not under arrest, Ms. Winters, but I strongly advise you not to leave town or take any independent actions regarding Skyward." "Are you saying I should cancel tonight's meeting?" He stood. "I'm saying we'll be nearby. Whatever you learn, we'd appreciate hearing it afterward." As he left, I sat stunned. The police had been investigating all along. Naomi was cooperating with them. And most puzzling, who else at Skyward had approached Naomi? I left the precinct with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Tonight's meeting with Thalia was more important than I'd realized. I spent the afternoon preparing, mentally rehearsing scenarios. If Thalia was breaking from Grant, she might see me as either a threat or a potential ally. Either way, I needed to be ready. At 6:45 p.m., I arrived at the address she'd provided, a small upscale bar in a boutique hotel far from Skyward's offices, the kind of place where privacy was expected and honored. Thalia was already there, sitting at a corner table nursing a martini. She looked different from the desperate intern in the rain or even the polished executive at Grant's penthouse. More guarded, more calculating. "You're punctual," she observed as I sat across from her. "I appreciate that. What do you want, Thalia?" I asked, skipping pleasantries. A server approached, but she waved them away. "I think we should speak frankly, Margot. We both know you installed surveillance software on Grant's laptop, just as we both know I let you walk out of that penthouse instead of calling security. The question is why? She took a deliberate sip of her drink. I've been watching you. The restaurant job, the apartment downgrade, the hair color change. Most people would have crumbled completely after what happened to you. Yet here you are, still fighting. Is this admiration or concern? I asked coldly. Pragmatism. She set her glass down. Grant is becoming a liability. He's getting careless, taking bigger risks. The scheme we created is sustainable only with precision and discipline. He's losing both. So you're worried about getting caught. I'm worried about getting blamed. Her eyes hardened. Grant has been systematically positioning me to take the fall if things collapse. Similar to what he did with you, but more elaborate. I leaned forward. Why are you telling me this? Because I know you've gathered evidence. I know you've been contacted by the authorities. And I know that tomorrow, the board is meeting to discuss irregularities that have been brought to their attention. By whom? A smile played at her lips. By me. I couldn't mask my surprise. You're turning on Grant? I'm protecting myself. She reached into her purse and withdrew a small drive. This contains everything. The actual fraud scheme. The plan to frame you. Grant's instructions on how to approach you that day with the fake baby story. Everything. Why would you give this to me? Because tomorrow, I'm presenting a sanitized version to the board that implicates Grant while minimizing my involvement. I'll appear as the conflicted insider who eventually did the right thing. She slid the drive across the table. This version, however, shows my full participation. Insurance policy against insurance policy. I stared at the drive without touching it. You want me to withhold this from the police if they come after you. I want mutual assured destruction, Margot. You use your evidence against Grant, not me. And I'll make sure the board not only fires him, but offers you a very generous settlement to avoid a messy, wrongful termination lawsuit. You think I can be bought? After what you did to me? I think you can be practical. She finished her martini. Grant destroyed your life. I helped, yes, but I wasn't the architect. He's been doing this for years. You weren't his first victim, but I'll be his last, I said quietly. Something in my tone made her study me more carefully. What are you planning? I finally picked up the drive. Pragmatism, Thalia. Just like you. I stood. You should know the police are watching this meeting. Alarm flashed briefly across her face. You're working with them? Let's just say our interests have temporarily aligned. I pocketed the drive. Good luck with your board presentation tomorrow. Margot. Her voice stopped me as I turned to leave. We're not so different, you and I. We're both survivors. I looked back at her. The difference is, I can still recognize my reflection in the mirror. I walked out into the cool evening air, my mind racing. Thalia's unexpected move had provided the final piece I needed. With her evidence combined with mine, I could ensure Grant's downfall. But her attempt to shield herself from consequences grated against every principle I held. Back in my apartment, I examined the drive's contents. Thalia hadn't lied. It contained everything, including videos of her and Grant planning my destruction in meticulous detail. Their casual cruelty as they discussed ruining my life made my hands shake with rage. I plugged in my laptop and began working, fingers flying across the keyboard as I prepared for tomorrow. Not just for the board meeting Thalia had mentioned, but for my own countermove. By dawn, everything was ready. I called Detective Carson. I met with Thalia Reed last night. I know, he replied. My colleagues observed your meeting. She provided evidence against Grant Ackerman while trying to minimize her own involvement. I have the complete files showing her full participation. A pause. And you're willing to turn those over? Yes, but I need something in return. I need to be present at Skyward today when everything unfolds. That's not standard procedure. Nothing about this case is standard, I interrupted. I've lost everything because of them. I deserve to see justice done. After a lengthy silence, he agreed to arrange it, with conditions. I would enter with the officers, remain in the background, and not interfere. 3 hours later, I stood in the elevator of Skyward's building, flanked by Carson and 2 other plainclothes officers. My heart pounded as we ascended to the executive floor. The board meeting would be starting in 10 minutes. As we stepped out, Naomi stood waiting, her expression a mix of anxiety and resolve. Our eyes met, and she gave a slight nod. "The conference room is ready," she told Carson. "Everyone's arriving now." "And the technical adjustments?" I asked quietly. "Done exactly as you requested," she confirmed. We moved toward the conference room, stopping just outside. Through the glass walls, I could see board members settling into their seats. Grant sat at the head of the table, the picture of confident authority. Thalia was setting up a presentation, her movements precise and controlled. Carson turned to me. "Remember our agreement. You observe only." I nodded, watching as Grant tapped his watch, signaling Thalia to begin. She clicked to her first slide, a financial overview that looked deliberately complicated. "Now," I whispered to Naomi. She pressed a button on her phone. Inside the conference room, the projection screen flickered, then changed, not to Thalia's carefully prepared presentation, but to a video of Grant and Thalia in his office. "The board's getting suspicious," Grant was saying. "We need to accelerate the transfers before next quarter." "And if someone notices?" Thalia asked. "We'll find another scapegoat. It worked with Margot. It'll work again." The board members froze, staring at the screen in shock. Grant lunged for the projector controls, but they were locked out. Thalia stood paralyzed, her careful plan disintegrating. As more incriminating videos played, each showing explicit details of their fraud, their affair, and their framing of me, Carson nodded to his officers. They entered the room, badges displayed. Grant Ackerman, Thalia Reed, were with the Financial Crimes Division. "We need you to come with us for questioning regarding securities fraud and corporate embezzlement." The chaos that erupted was spectacular. Board members shouting questions, Grant trying to delete files on his phone until an officer stopped him. Thalia looking directly through the glass at me, her expression shifting from shock to something like grudging respect. As they were let out, Grant finally noticed me standing in the hallway. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by disbelief, then fury. I simply watched, my expression neutral, as he was escorted past me in handcuffs. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Actually," I replied calmly, "it is." After they were gone, Carson approached me. "That video wasn't part of our evidence collection." "No," I admitted. "That was mine. Remote access to their presentation system is potentially illegal." I met his gaze steadily. "Then perhaps you should arrest me too." He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. "The board is asking to speak with you." The next hour passed in a blur. The board members, desperate to contain the scandal, offered immediate reinstatement with a promotion, back pay, and a substantial settlement for wrongful termination. I declined the position but accepted the financial compensation. My reputation would be publicly restored with a company-wide announcement and press release. As I left the building, Naomi walked me to the elevator. "What will you do now?" she asked. I smiled for what felt like the first time in months. Start over. On my terms this time. That evening, as reporters gathered outside Skyward headquarters and the story broke across financial news networks, I sat on the floor of my small apartment surrounded by printouts and drives, the evidence of my vindication. My phone rang. "Zoe." "Mom," she said when I answered, her voice thick with emotion. "I just saw the news. I'm so sorry I doubted you." "It's okay," I told her, tears filling my eyes. It looked convincing because it was designed to. "I'm coming home this weekend," she declared. "We need to celebrate, and I want to hear everything." After we hung up, I opened my laptop to check on one final piece of my revenge, one neither the police nor Thalia knew about. When I'd installed the keylogger on Grant's computer, I'd also planted another program, one that would activate at precisely 9 p.m. tonight, sending emails from Grant's personal account to every board member, major shareholder, and his wife. The emails contained every message between him and Thalia, professional and personal, every plan they'd made, every cruel comment about his wife, every detail of how they'd framed me and planned to frame others. At exactly 9 p.m., my screen showed the program executing flawlessly, hundreds of emails delivering truth directly from Grant's account, ensuring that even if legal proceedings somehow failed, his destruction in every circle that mattered to him would be complete. As a final touch, a special email went to his wife with evidence of not just Thalia, but 3 previous affairs with employees, along with detailed financial information about assets he'd hidden during their prenuptial agreement. Everything her divorce attorney would need to take him for every penny. I closed my laptop, a sense of peace washing over me for the first time in months. Grant and Thalia had tried to erase me, to make me small and invisible. They'd underestimated not just my resilience, but my capacity for methodical, patient retribution. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Statements to the press, meetings with attorneys, decisions about my future. But tonight, I simply savored the knowledge that justice, Comstay, my justice, had finally been served. The woman they'd tried to destroy had risen from the ashes, not just to reclaim her life, but to ensure they lost everything they valued in theirs. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, phones were pinging with notifications, lives were imploding, truth was spreading like wildfire, and I, Margot Winters, was finally free. If this story of persistence and calculated revenge resonated with you, please hit that like button. I'd love to hear in the comments what you would have done in Margot's shoes. Would you have gone for revenge or just moved on? Subscribe for more stories about women who refused to be underestimated and broken by those who thought they could get away with anything. Remember, sometimes justice isn't about what happens in a courtroom. It's about making sure the truth finds its way into exactly the right hands. The heat hit me first, a wall of scorching air that stole my breath as I yanked open the heavy metal door. The storage room was dark except for the emergency light casting an eerie red glow across metal shelves stacked with supplies. That's when I saw her, Penelope, crumpled against the far wall, her uniform soaked through with sweat, hair plastered to her forehead. "Penny?" I whispered, rushing toward her. Her eyes fluttered open, cracked lips parting. "Vera?" Her voice was a dry rasp. "Water, please." The digital thermometer on the wall read 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In July, with no ventilation, the storage room had become an oven. I touched her arm, her skin burned against my fingertips. "How long have you been in here?" I asked, already pulling my water bottle from my bag. She gulped greedily, water spilling down her chin. "Since yesterday afternoon, after the meeting." My stomach clenched. 17 hours trapped in sweltering heat. "I found something," she whispered, eyes darting to the door. "In the safety reports, when I showed Kent Alvarez, regional manager, the man who'd given me a final warning last week for questioning overtime policies. He told me to double-check some inventory." She continued, said he'd be right back. Then, click. Her fingers weakly mimicked a key turning. I screamed until my voice gave out. I helped her stand, her legs buckling beneath her. The guard wouldn't arrive for another hour. Management had implemented a strict policy: no unauthorized personnel in office areas outside working hours. Penny had been invisible, trapped, while the cleaning crew vacuumed just yards away. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said, supporting her weight. She clutched my arm, nails digging in. "The reports. They're falsifying safety checks, Vera. Equipment that failed inspection. They're still using it. Someone's going to get hurt." As we stumbled toward the exit, Penny suddenly froze. Through the glass panel in the door, I could see Kent walking across the parking lot, 40 minutes earlier than his usual arrival. His face, when he spotted us through the window, first shock, then something darker flickering across his features, told me everything. He knew exactly what he'd done, and he'd done it on purpose. I wonder if you've ever seen someone's mask slip. That moment when the person you thought you knew reveals something monstrous underneath? If you have, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear how this nightmare at work ended, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My name is Vera Tennyson, 32 years old, 5 years at Woodland Manufacturing, and until that morning, I believed hard work and honesty were enough to succeed. I was raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Grandma Rose taught kindergarten for 40 years and raised me with simple values: tell the truth, help others, and stand up for what's right. I started in packaging, and worked my way up to quality control supervisor. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills for my small apartment and kept me close to my grandmother as her health declined. Woodland made industrial water pumps, critical equipment for cities across the Midwest. Our products had to be flawless. Penny and I weren't close friends, just workplace allies. She'd transferred from the Eastern branch 6 months earlier, brilliant, detail-oriented, and refreshingly straightforward. While other coworkers avoided management scrutiny by keeping their heads down, Penny asked questions. She studied manuals, memorized safety protocols, and suggested improvements. Management hated her for it. "They're waiting for me to quit," she'd told me during lunch break 3 weeks before the incident. "But my son starts college next year. I need this job." I remember thinking she was paranoid, until that morning when I found her locked in what could have become her tomb. Kent's face hardened as he strode through the door. All business now, the momentary shock replaced with controlled anger. "What are you doing here so early, Vera? And why is Penelope out of the storage area?" The casualness of his question made my skin crawl. "She was locked in overnight," I said, still supporting Penny's weight. "The temperature's over 100 degrees in there. She needs medical attention." Kent straightened his tie. "There must be some misunderstanding. Penelope was assigned inventory duty. The door doesn't lock from the outside." Penny's fingers dug into my arm. "You locked me in," she whispered. "You knew what you were doing." "That's a serious accusation," Kent said, his voice dangerously soft. "One that could have consequences. For both of you." 2 other employees arrived then, stopping short at the scene before them. Kent's demeanor shifted instantly. "Penelope isn't feeling well," he announced loudly. "Vera, please take her to urgent care. Company policy requires an incident report. I'll have it ready when you return." I helped Penny to my car, the weight of Kent's stare burning into my back. The urgent care doctor didn't bother hiding his concern. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion that could have progressed to heat stroke. Another few hours. He shook his head. "How exactly did this happen?" While Penny received IV fluids, I called her son, Drake, a high school senior with his mother's serious eyes. When he arrived, his face crumpled at the sight of his mother in a hospital bed. "Mom works so hard," he told me in the hallway. "Since Dad left, it's been just us. She takes every overtime shift they offer." When Penny was stable enough to talk, she told us everything. The irregularities she'd found in the safety inspection reports, equipment that had failed critical tests but received passing marks, maintenance schedules altered, her meeting with Kent where he'd suggested she was confused about the regulations. "He knew exactly what he was doing," she said, voice stronger now. "Putting me in that room was a message. We need to report this," I insisted. Penny's laugh was bitter. "To who?" "Regional Director Preston is Kent's brother-in-law. HR reports directly to them. The last person who filed a complaint was transferred to night shift until they quit." Drake took his mother's hand. "Mom, you can't go back there." Her eyes met mine, and I saw the decision form. "I won't." We returned to Woodland that afternoon with resignation letters. Kent accepted them with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunate you both feel this way," he said smoothly. "But perhaps it's for the best. Small towns have small memories, but word does travel about. Difficult employees." As we walked to our cars for the last time, Penny turned to me. "Thank you. If you hadn't come in early today." "Don't." I cut her off, unable to contemplate the alternative. "What will you do now?" she asked. I hadn't thought that far ahead. My grandmother needed her medications. I had rent due in 2 weeks. "I'll find something," I said with more confidence than I felt. Kent's parting threat proved prophetic. Within days, the rejections began. Positions I was qualified for suddenly filled before interviews. Applications mysteriously lost. One potential employer actually winced when he saw my resume. "You worked at Woodland?" he asked, already closing my file. Penny faced similar obstacles. After 3 weeks of rejections, she and Drake moved in with her sister 2 states away. "It's not right," she told me during our goodbye call. "They're going to hurt someone, Vera. Those pumps go into hospitals, nursing homes, schools." I'd been living on ramen and picking up delivery gigs to make rent. Grandma Rose had raised me to believe in justice. but justice seemed in short supply. What can we do? I asked. No one will listen. Someone will, Penny replied. We just need to make them hear us. After we hung up, I sat in my darkening apartment, fury building inside me. Kent and the others had calculated exactly how much power they held in our small town. They'd weaponized our need for jobs, our community connections, our limited options, and they'd nearly killed Penny to silence her. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to play with people's lives, they'd learn that some people fight back. I opened my laptop and began to research. The annual Midwest Industrial Safety Conference was 6 weeks away. Woodland Manufacturing would host the event, showcasing their commitment to safety with state inspectors, industry leaders, and regulators in attendance. Kent was scheduled as the keynote speaker. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had as much reason to hate Kent as I did. Penny, I have an idea, but I'll need your help, and we'll need others. For the first time since finding her in that storage room, I felt something beyond anger and helplessness. I felt purpose. What I didn't know then was how many others had suffered under Woodland's management, or how far Kent would go to protect himself, or that our plan would spiral into something far bigger and more dangerous than we'd imagined. I also didn't know that someone inside Woodland was watching our every move, ready to destroy us before we could expose the truth. The first hint that we weren't alone in our fight came 3 days later. I was delivering pizzas, my third shift that week, when the customer opened her door and gasped, "You're Vera Tennyson," she said, eyes wide. I nodded warily, used to small-town recognition, but suspicious now. I'm Zola. I worked at Woodland for 8 years. Accounting department. She glanced over her shoulder before pulling me inside. You need to know something. You and Penelope weren't the first. In her kitchen, Zola showed me a notebook filled with dates, names, and incidents. I started keeping track 3 years ago, after the acquisition. I scanned the pages, ice spreading through my veins. 13 employees who'd raised safety concerns, all systematically isolated, harassed, or placed in dangerous situations until they quit. One had suffered chemical burns in a storage accident remarkably similar to Penny's. Why didn't anyone report this? I asked. Zola's smile was sad. To who? The local paper's owner plays golf with Preston. The county inspector's daughter got a management position at Woodland right out of college. They've built their fortress carefully. Why are you showing me this? Because you're still fighting, she said simply. And you're not the only one. We've been waiting for the right moment. My phone chimed with another delivery reminder. As I stood to leave, Zola pressed a flash drive into my hand. Financial records, she whispered. Where the money's really going instead of equipment maintenance. Be careful who sees this. As I drove to my next delivery, my mind raced. We weren't just seeking justice for Penny anymore. This was bigger, more dangerous, and suddenly more possible than I'd imagined. I called Penny that night. We're going to need more help, I told her, and I think I know where to find it. Over the next 2 weeks, our small resistance grew. Zola connected us with former employees scattered across 3 counties. Each had a story, each had evidence, each had been silenced, until now. Theo from maintenance, who'd been ordered to bypass safety valves on industrial equipment. Imani from shipping, who'd documented mishandled hazardous materials. Reese from testing, who'd kept copies of altered inspection reports. But the most valuable alliance came from someone still inside Woodland, Kit, a janitor who'd worked there for 20 years, invisible to management but with access to every room, every conversation. They're panicking about the conference. Kit told me during our clandestine meeting at a truck stop 50 miles from town. State inspectors are coming, industry bigwigs. They've got crews working overtime to create a Potemkin village. Kit slid a security badge across the table. This will get you into any room except executive offices, and I've mapped the camera blind spots. Our plan took shape. Document everything, gather witnesses, and create a moment so public that Woodland couldn't silence it. The safety conference would be their unveiling, just not the one they planned. But even as our network grew, so did the pressure. My grandmother's nursing home called about a payment issue. Her insurance had mysteriously denied coverage. My landlord received complaints about late-night business activities from my apartment. My car developed brake problems no mechanic could explain. Then came the warning. I returned from a delivery shift to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was taken, but my research was neatly stacked on the kitchen table. Research I'd kept only on a password-protected laptop. On top lay a note. Some fires burn those who start them. That night, huddled in a motel room I couldn't afford, I called Penny. They know, I whispered. They're watching us. Her voice was steady. Then we accelerate. The conference is in 10 days. We move now. It's too dangerous, I argued. They already tried to kill me, Vera, she interrupted. What more can they take? My career's gone. I'm living on my sister's couch. My son had to delay college. Her voice hardened. What about the next person they decide is a problem? Or the family whose home floods because of a faulty pump? How many people have to suffer before we stop them? I thought of Grandma Rose, who'd faced down school boards and angry parents to protect her students, who'd taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. Okay, I said finally, but we need to be smarter than they are. What we didn't realize was that Kent had already set his own counterplan in motion, one designed not just to discredit us, but to eliminate any threat permanently. The chess game had begun, and unlike Kent, we couldn't afford to sacrifice any pieces. 8 days before the conference, our first major obstacle emerged. Kit called me at 3 a.m., voice tight with panic. They're installing new security systems, keycard access to every external door, biometric scanners for sensitive areas. And they've hired external security for the conference, not the usual rent-a-cops. These guys look military. I paced my motel room, heart hammering. Can you get me the specifications? Already working on it. But there's more. They're doing background checks on all conference attendees. Anyone with Woodland connections in the last 5 years is being flagged. Our original plan, having our witnesses attend as industry representatives, was disintegrating. We'll adapt, I said, projecting confidence I didn't feel. Keep your head down, don't risk your position. After hanging up, I stared at the wall where I'd taped our timeline. Red markers slashed through each passing day, counting down to the conference. Our window was narrowing. I called an emergency meeting at Zola's cabin outside town, the only place we could gather without surveillance. 14 former employees crammed into her living room, faces drawn with exhaustion and worry. Theo, a burly maintenance worker with calloused hands, spoke first. My cousin works for the security company they hired. These guys don't mess around. If we try to force our way in, we won't, I interrupted. We'll be smarter. Imani leaned forward, her braids swinging. I've been monitoring their conference preparations. They're transforming the place, fresh paint, new equipment, temporary walls hiding the problematic areas. The presentation will showcase their state-of-the-art safety protocols. Reese, a former testing specialist, snorted. Safety protocols they've never actually implemented. What about the evidence? I asked Zola. The financial records? The falsified reports? Compiled and ready, she confirmed, but without access to the conference. The room fell silent. Weeks of planning, evidence gathering, and risk-taking, all potentially wasted. Then Penny spoke from the video call on my laptop. She couldn't risk returning to town, but her voice filled the room. What's the one thing they can't control on conference day? We looked at each other blankly. The weather, she said simply. Outside, thunder rumbled as if on cue. July in the Midwest meant scorching temperatures, but also violent storms that could arise without warning. The building's climate control, I said slowly, understanding dawning. If it failed during the conference. Theo's eyes widened. The backup generators only cover emergency lighting and critical operations, not air conditioning. With outdoor temperatures forecasted at 95 degrees that day, Penny continued, and hundreds of bodies in an enclosed space. The temperature would soar, Reese finished, just like that storage room. A plan began forming, elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its symbolism. Make them feel what Penny felt. Create conditions they couldn't ignore or control. They hurt people by making them invisible, I said quietly. We'll make the invisible impossible to ignore. For the first time since we started, I saw genuine hope in their faces. But as we dispersed that night, None of us noticed the dark sedan parked half a mile down the road, its occupant speaking quietly into a phone. The next morning, I woke to frantic knocking. Reese stood at my motel door, face ashen. "They got Kit," he said. "Anonymous tip about stolen company property. Police searched his apartment this morning." My blood turned to ice. "Did they find anything?" "No, Kit's too smart. But they fired him on the spot. And the message is clear. They're picking us off one by one." The loss of our inside connection was devastating. Without Kit, we had no eyes inside Woodland, no access to secure areas. Worse, Kent now knew exactly who was helping us. That afternoon, my grandmother called from the nursing home, her voice weak and confused. "Vera, the nurse says I'm being transferred to a different facility tomorrow." "Transferred to where?" "Someplace 3 hours away. They say my insurance changed." Pure rage flooded my system. They were targeting my grandmother, a frail 84-year-old woman, to get to me. I called the nursing home administrator, who apologetically confirmed the transfer. The authorization came directly from her insurance provider. Nothing we can do. The insurance company stonewalled me with bureaucratic excuses. By evening, I was sitting in my car outside Woodland Manufacturing, watching employees leave for the day, wondering which window belonged to Kent's office. My phone rang. "Zola, don't do anything stupid," she said without preamble. "We've got another way." "They're going after my grandmother," I hissed. "I know, and we'll fix it. But not by confronting Kent directly. That's exactly what he wants. You losing control, making threats he can use against you." She was right, but the knowledge did nothing to cool my rage. "Come to my place," she insisted. "Now." At Zola's cabin, I found Imani huddled over a laptop with a young man I didn't recognize. "This is my brother, Leo," Imani explained. "He works in health insurance software, and he has interesting news about your grandmother's policy change. However," Leo adjusted his glasses, "the transfer authorization didn't come through normal channels. Someone accessed the system using administrative credentials and manually flagged her file." "Can you reverse it?" I asked. "Already done," he said with a tight smile. "And I've locked it from further changes while making it look like a system error. Your grandmother stays where she is." Relief washed over me, followed immediately by fresh worry. "They'll just try something else." "Which is why we're moving up our timeline," Zola said. "The conference is 6 days away, but we make our move tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I echoed. "We're not ready." "We don't have a choice," Imani said softly. "Kent's not just trying to stop us now. He's sending a message about what happens to people who challenge him. And we need to send our own message," Zola added, "starting with the most important piece of our plan." She handed me a sealed envelope. "Your grandmother's transfer might have been stopped, but others won't be so lucky. Inside is a bus ticket to Millridge, 3 hours away. Someone's waiting to meet you there." "Who?" "Someone who can finally make people listen." The bus arrived in Millridge just after noon the next day. Standing at the terminal, checking faces against the photograph Zola had given me, I finally spotted her, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Helen Braddock," she said, extending her hand. "State Labor Department." My heart skipped. "You're the one person in the regulatory system Kent Alvarez can't control or intimidate," she finished. "I've been building a case against Woodland for 18 months. What I lack is first-hand witnesses willing to go on record." In a small cafe, I laid out everything. Penny's imprisonment, the falsified safety reports, the systematic elimination of whistleblowers, the defective equipment being shipped to hospitals and schools. Helen listened without interruption, taking meticulous notes. "This matches my findings," she said finally. "But testimony isn't enough. We need irrefutable evidence." "We have documents," I said. "Financial records showing money diverted from safety upgrades, altered inspection reports." "And how did you obtain these documents?" she asked pointedly. I hesitated, understanding the problem. Evidence gathered illegally might be inadmissible. "I thought so," Helen said. "Here's the reality. I can open a formal investigation, but Woodland will have time to cover their tracks. Their lawyers will tie us up for years while they continue operating." My heart sank. So we've risked everything for nothing? I didn't say that. A hint of steel entered her voice. The safety conference creates a unique opportunity. If violations were observed by outside witnesses, particularly state inspectors already present for the conference, that would change everything. The inspectors will only see what Woodland wants them to see, I argued. They've transformed the facility. Unless something forced them to look deeper. Helen leaned forward. Tell me about this plan your group has developed. I hesitated, then decided to trust her. I outlined our strategy to disable the climate control during the conference, forcing attendees to experience conditions similar to what Penny endured. Helen nodded slowly. Symbolic, but potentially effective. However, there's a missing piece. You need to ensure the right people see the right evidence at the right moment. How do we do that without access to the conference? That, Helen said with the first smile I'd seen from her, is where I come in. She slid a conference badge across the table. Chief Inspector, State Industrial Safety Board. I was already attending. Now, I'll be your eyes inside. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. There's something else you should know, Helen added, her expression darkening. Kent Alvarez isn't just creating hostile working conditions. The pumps Woodland manufactures are showing failure rates far above industry standards. 3 hospitals have reported emergency generator flooding from faulty pumps in the past year. The implications hit me like a physical blow. People could die. People already have, Helen corrected grimly. A nursing home in Laketon lost power during a heat wave when their backup generators flooded. 2 residents died before evacuation. I thought of my grandmother, of Penny trapped in that sweltering room. We're not just fighting for justice anymore, I whispered. We're preventing more deaths. Exactly. Helen gathered her notes. Your group has created the perfect opportunity. Now we need to ensure it exposes the full scope of what's happening at Woodland. As we parted, Helen gripped my arm. Be careful, Vera. Kent Alvarez has powerful friends and few scruples. This will get worse before it gets better. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove. 3 days before the conference, disaster struck. Theo, our maintenance expert who would disable the climate controls, didn't show for our final planning meeting. Calls went straight to voicemail. When Reese drove past his house, police cars filled the driveway. Manufacturing meth, Imani reported after making calls to contacts in law enforcement. They found a lab in his garage. That's impossible, I exploded. Theo wouldn't. Of course he wouldn't, Zola interrupted. But evidence can be planted. And Theo has a decade-old possession charge that makes the accusations sticky enough to hold him. Our plan was unraveling. Without Theo's expertise, the climate control sabotage, the centerpiece of our strategy, was in jeopardy. I can do it, Reese offered. Theo showed me the basics. Too risky, I countered. You don't have his experience. What choice do we have? Imani demanded. The conference is 3 days away. We've lost Kit and Theo. Kent is picking us off systematically. That night, alone in my motel room, I called Penny. Maybe we should stop, I said, exhaustion seeping into my voice. They're always one step ahead. Someone could get seriously hurt. Penny was silent so long I thought we'd lost connection. Do you remember what the doctor said? She finally asked. About what would have happened if you hadn't found me? Yes. I keep thinking about that. How close I came to dying in that room. How Drake would have gotten a call that his mother was found dead at work. How Kent would have manufactured some explanation. Her voice hardened. And I think about the next person who questions their practices. And the people using those faulty pumps. She was right. The cost of failure wasn't just our justice. It was future victims. We continue, I said with renewed resolve. But we need to change tactics. They're expecting us to target the conference from inside, so we work from outside. In the new plan that emerged, we wouldn't need access to the building systems at all. Nature would do that for us. The weather forecast for conference day showed temperatures nearing 100 degrees with high humidity, dangerous heat by any standard. All we needed was to ensure the building's cooling systems failed at the right moment. The main transformer, Reese explained over a secure call. It's external to the building, feeds power to the cooling towers. If it overheated at peak load, how? I asked. Reflective panels, he said, positioned to focus additional solar heat on the transformer housing. With the system already straining against record temperatures, it wouldn't take much to push it over the edge. It was elegant, required no internal access, and couldn't be traced to sabotage, just unfortunate positioning of temporary structures for the conference. But Kent wasn't finished with us yet. The morning before the conference, I woke to pounding on my door. Not police this time. Drake, Penny's son. Eyes wild with panic. Mom's been arrested, he gasped. Identity theft charges. They're saying she stole patient data from her last job before Woodland. Kent had played his trump card. With Penny in custody, the heart would go out of our resistance. Many might back out entirely. Drake handed me his phone with a text from Penny. Continue no matter what. This ends tomorrow. Conference day dawned scorching hot, the sun already brutal at 7 a.m. Our remaining team gathered at our staging point, a park overlooking Woodland Manufacturing. Through binoculars, we could see attendees arriving, security checking credentials at every entrance. Everyone clear on their roles? I asked. Nods all around, faces grim but determined. Helen's inside, Zola confirmed. Positioned near the main conference hall with full access to the executive presentation room. Reese? He patted his bag. Reflective panels ready. I can place them without being seen from the security perimeter. Imani? Media contacts on standby. One call brings 3 news crews. And the evidence packets? Prepared and positioned, Zola confirmed. Ready for distribution the moment conditions are right. As they dispersed to their positions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. After weeks of reactive scrambling, we were finally taking the initiative. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. Kent would be welcoming attendees now, all corporate smiles and rehearsed warmth. By noon, the outdoor temperature would hit 97 degrees. By 1 p.m., when Kent was scheduled to present Woodland's industry-leading safety protocols, the building's interior would become unbearable. What Kent didn't know, what none of them knew, was that we weren't just creating discomfort, we were creating understanding. Sometimes, to make people care about invisible suffering, you have to make that suffering visible, and by day's end, no one would be able to look away. I positioned myself on the hill overlooking Woodland Manufacturing's main entrance, close enough to monitor the situation but far enough to avoid security. Through binoculars, I watched attendees filing into the gleaming glass building. Men and women in suits, carrying briefcases and conference folders, completely unaware they were walking into our carefully orchestrated revelation. My earpiece crackled. Reflective panels in position, Reese reported, angled perfectly. With this sun, the transformer should hit critical temperature around 12:30. Helen's in position, Zola added. Kent just welcomed everyone to the main hall. She says it's packed. Every state regulator and industry leader within 300 miles. I checked the outdoor temperature display on a nearby bank. 91 degrees Fahrenheit at 9:15 in the morning. The forecast promised at least 6 more degrees by midday. Any word on Penny? I asked. Her attorney is working on bail, Drake replied, his voice tight with worry. The charges are paper thin, but they're keeping her in holding until after the conference. Of course they were. Kent had planned this meticulously, removing our most compelling witness before his moment in the spotlight. What he hadn't counted on was our contingency planning. By 11 a.m., the conference was in full swing. Presentations on industry standards, vendor displays of safety equipment, networking over coffee and pastries. All in climate-controlled comfort while Kent worked the room, shaking hands, playing the role of safety advocate. At 11:47, Reese's voice came through my earpiece. Transformer temperature rising faster than expected. This heat is unreal. I scanned the cloudless sky. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, the kind of heat that shimmers above asphalt and makes breathing feel like work. How long? I asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. I relayed this to our team members stationed around the perimeter. Everyone ready? Affirmations came through one by one. We'd positioned our people at every exit, ready to guide conference attendees to our evidence station once the inevitable evacuation began. At 12:09 it happened. The main transformer made a sound like distant thunder, then went silent. Immediately, the building's emergency lights flickered on, but as predicted, the climate control system shut down completely. Through my binoculars, I watched confusion spread through the lobby. Security personnel rushed outside to check the transformer, finding nothing more suspicious than sun-baked equipment on the hottest day of summer. Helen reports the temperature is already climbing in the main hall, Zola said. Kent is assuring everyone they'll have power restored momentarily. Now came the waiting game. Inside that building, hundreds of professionals in business attire were about to experience what Penny had endured for 17 hours. The difference? They could leave any time. She couldn't. By 12:45, we could see people loosening ties, removing jackets. Windows were opened, but the breezeless day offered no relief. Staff distributed water bottles, but supplies quickly dwindled. Interior temperature has hit 85 degrees, Helen reported through Zola. Kent's insisting they continue with the program. He doesn't want to postpone his keynote. Of course he didn't. The keynote was his crowning achievement, ICC, proof of his leadership to industry peers and superiors. He'd sacrifice comfort rather than surrender his moment. By 1:15, the situation inside deteriorated rapidly. Through binoculars, I watched red-faced attendees fanning themselves with programs. Kent took the stage, sweat darkening his shirt, still smiling that plastic smile. Helen says it's 91 degrees inside now, Zola reported. Someone just asked to move the presentation outside. Kent refused. I checked the outdoor temperature, 98 Fahrenheit. Inside that sealed building, with hundreds of bodies generating additional heat, conditions were becoming dangerous. At 1:32, the first person collapsed, an elderly inspector overcome by heat. Medical personnel rushed forward, but in the crowded, overheated room, they struggled to reach him. Now, I said into my communicator, Imani, call your media contacts. Everyone else to positions. Kent tried maintaining control, directing attendees to remain seated, promising the power would return any moment. But as a second person showed signs of heat distress, the exodus began. Security couldn't contain it. Hundreds of overheated professionals streaming toward exits, seeking relief. As they emerged into the scorching parking lot, our team members were waiting, not with protests or accusations, but with cold water, portable fans, and simple directions. Relief stations set up in the shade across the street. Under canopies in the park opposite Woodland, we'd arranged water stations, seating, and large fans powered by portable generators. Immediate relief from the sweltering conditions. And beside each station, documentation tables. As the conference attendees gratefully accepted water and cooling, they found themselves surrounded by evidence of Woodland's malfeasance, testimony transcripts, financial records showing diverted safety funds, photographs of defective equipment installed in hospitals and schools, medical reports from injured employees, and most damning of all, a large display showing Penny's medical records from the day I found her, alongside the storage room temperature logs and security footage showing Kent locking the door. Helen Braddock moved through the crowd, no longer just an observer but directing state inspectors to specific evidence. Media vans pulled up, cameras capturing the scene of disheveled industry leaders and regulators, reviewing damning documentation, while Woodland executives watched helplessly from across the street. Through my binoculars, I found Kent standing at the building entrance, face contorted with fury as he realized what was happening. When he spotted news cameras, he retreated inside. He's running, I said into my communicator, probably heading for his office to destroy records. No, he's not. Helen's voice came through clearly now. I've got state police securing all executive offices. No one enters until we complete our inspection. The temperature continued climbing. By 2 p.m., the outdoor thermometer read 99 Fahrenheit. Inside Woodland's main hall, where some attendees and staff remained, temperatures approached 105 Fahrenheit. Almost exactly what Penny had endured. That's when we unveiled our final element, a large screen activated at our relief station, showing a pre-recorded video of Penny, calm, professional, sitting at a desk with documents visible. My name is Penelope Merritt, her voice rang out over the crowd. Until recently, I was a quality control specialist at Woodland Manufacturing. What you're experiencing today, this heat, this discomfort, is what I endured for 17 hours after discovering falsified safety reports. The crowd fell silent. Water bottles paused midway to lips, all eyes on the screen. Woodland Manufacturing has systematically endangered lives by cutting safety measures and silencing employees who speak up, Penny continued. The equipment they produce protects critical infrastructure: hospitals, nursing homes, schools. When it fails, people die. She held up documents, explaining each one in clear, precise language: the technical violations, the covered-up failures, the retribution against whistleblowers. The temperature you're feeling right now, she concluded, is the same temperature I was locked in for discovering these violations. The difference? You can leave. I couldn't. And the people depending on Woodland's equipment can't escape the consequences of their negligence either. As her video ended, the real power of our plan became evident. We hadn't just created discomfort, we'd created understanding. Every person there had physically experienced a fraction of what Penny endured. The heat had made abstract concerns visceral and immediate. Across the street, Woodland executives huddled in panicked conversation. Several state inspectors were already entering the building, Helen Braddock directing them to specific areas we'd identified. My earpiece crackled. "Vera, you need to see this." I turned my binoculars toward the main entrance. A police car had pulled up, and officers were escorting someone inside. Not taking someone away, bringing someone in. My heart leaped. Penny. Her attorney had secured her release. "Let's finish this," I said, descending from my observation point. By the time I crossed to our relief station, the scene had transformed. What began as a simple cooling area was now an impromptu investigation headquarters. State officials interviewed former employees. Inspectors examined documentation. Reporters captured it all. I found Zola directing people to specific evidence stations. The Industrial Safety Board just declared an emergency suspension of operations. She told me, eyes bright with vindication. Helen fast-tracked it. Woodland is shut down pending full investigation. Kent, barricaded in his office, refusing to come out. As if summoned by his name, a commotion erupted at the building entrance. Kent emerged, flanked by security, attempting to push through to his car. His face was flushed, tie askew, the composed executive persona completely shattered. He froze when he saw the media. Then his eyes found me in the crowd. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the distance. His expressions cycled through shock, rage, and finally, fear. That's when Penny stepped into his path. The parking lot fell silent. Here was the woman from the video, the one whose suffering they'd just symbolically shared, standing face to face with the man responsible. Kent recovered quickly, corporate mask sliding back into place. "Penelope, I see the misunderstanding about your identity theft charges has been cleared up." "No misunderstanding, Kent," she replied, voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Just one more attempt to silence someone who knew too much." "These accusations are groundless," he said loudly, aware of the cameras now trained on him. "Woodland Manufacturing has an exemplary safety record. It's 105 degrees in your conference hall right now." Penny interrupted. "Exactly the temperature you locked me in for 17 hours. How does it feel, Kent? Unbearable after just 3 hours, isn't it?" His composure cracked. "I never locked you anywhere. You're making accusations without proof." "We have the security footage," Helen Braddock said, stepping forward, "and sworn statements from 15 former employees documenting systematic safety violations and retribution against whistleblowers." Kent's eyes darted around, looking for allies, finding none. Even his own security staff had stepped back, creating distance. "My attorney will." "Your attorney will be very busy," Helen cut in. "The state has opened a criminal investigation into willful negligence resulting in death. Those nursing home residents who died when your faulty pumps failed? We have the inspection records showing you shipped that equipment despite failed safety tests." The color drained from Kent's face. This was no longer about workplace harassment or corporate misconduct. This was manslaughter. As state police officers approached him, Kent made one last desperate attempt. This was a setup, They sabotaged the power to create this situation. Helen stepped closer. The transformer overheated due to record temperatures and poor maintenance. Another safety violation we've documented. Your own staff confirmed the maintenance schedule was altered to cut costs. I watched as Kent was escorted to a police car, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him, not with dramatic confrontations or violent retribution, but with something far more powerful. Hafen, the simple, irrefutable exposure of truth. In the days that followed, the full impact of our action unfolded like a wave spreading outward. State investigators uncovered violations far beyond what even we had documented. 3 executives were indicted for criminal negligence. Woodland Manufacturing was placed under state supervision, its leadership removed. Kent faced multiple criminal charges, not just for his treatment of employees, but for knowingly allowing defective safety equipment to be installed in critical facilities. The story spread nationwide. Other workers at similar companies came forward with their own accounts of safety violations and retribution. Regulatory agencies launched investigations into industry-wide practices. For us, the aftermath brought both vindication and healing. Penny's identity theft charges were dismissed with prejudice. Theo was released, the manufacturing charges exposed as fabrication. Former employees were offered reinstatement with back pay and damages. 1 month after the conference, I met Penny at a small cafe downtown. The same cafe where I'd once feared being seen with her, now the site of our victory celebration. "Have you heard?" she asked as I sat down. "The state legislature is drafting new whistleblower protections. They're calling it the Woodland Act." I smiled. Appropriate naming. "Helen called this morning," Penny continued. "She's been appointed to head a new division focusing on industrial safety compliance. She's offering positions to those of us who helped expose Woodland. Are you going to accept?" Penny nodded. "Drake starts college next month. Full scholarship. Turns out exposing corporate corruption makes for a compelling admissions essay." We laughed, the sound light and unfamiliar after months of tension and fear. "What about you?" she asked. "Any regrets?" I considered the question. The risks we'd taken, the fear we'd lived with, the system we'd challenged. "Not one," I answered truthfully. We didn't just get justice for ourselves. We prevented more people from being hurt. As we sat there, I realized something profound had shifted, not just in the regulatory landscape or in corporate accountability, but in me. Grandma Rose had taught me to stand up for what's right, but I'd never truly understood the cost, or the power, of that stance, until now. Kent had weaponized the very systems meant to protect people: employment, healthcare, law enforcement. He'd calculated that most people would accept injustice rather than risk everything fighting it. His one miscalculation? He hurt someone who refused to stay invisible. I looked at Penny across the table, her face no longer drawn with fear but alight with purpose. "We should document what happened," I suggested. "How a group of ordinary people stood up to corporate power and won. Others might need the blueprint." "I think that's an excellent idea," she agreed. "People need to know they're not powerless. And that's why I'm sharing this story now. Not just as a record of what happened that scorching summer, but as a reminder that systems of power depend on our silence and isolation to continue unchecked. Sometimes justice requires more than filing complaints or following procedures. Sometimes it requires creativity, courage, and the willingness to make the invisible suffering visible to those who can stop it. If you're facing your own Kent Alvarez, someone abusing power while counting on your silence, remember our story. Find your allies, gather your evidence, and create your moment when the truth can't be ignored. Because in the end, that's how change happens. Not all at once, but person by person, standing up and saying, "This stops now." If our story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences standing up to workplace injustice, and subscribe for more real stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. Because the most important lesson we learned, we were never actually powerless. We just needed to discover our power together.